The section A of both is the same, and that section eliminates same-day registration and replaces it with a new election system called provisional voting. 540,000 people in a presidential year use election day or same-day registration. Almost every Minnesotan has used it in your life. How many people in this room have ever used it in your life? Yeah, so like, whoa, would that suppress the vote? I think so. So that's section A. And that's a huge change, okay? And they put that to a vote in Maine last November, and Maine folks did kind of what you did, which is 61 to 38%. They said, what? And they restored same-day registration in Maine. Section B, which is a smaller section, and the two are quite different, the House and Senate, addresses the question of photographic identification. In the section in the House version, there are very large loopholes to who would need to provide that identification. Anyone in a small town or township that had moved to all-mail balloting was exempted. Anyone voting absentee, and really almost everybody can vote absentee by mail. I mean, there were some huge, huge loopholes. On the Senate side, there was a separate and, I would say, somewhat companion requirement that if you're voting by mail, you had to provide something called proof of identity, which was not defined, but something like a notary. But there was a loophole that said photographic identification or equivalent, which is kind of a big loophole. So my point is that what's being moved through the legislature maybe is a little misnamed. Maybe there hasn't been much focus on the big part, which is wiping out election day registration and replacing it with this big thing called provisional voting. But let me just say that provisional voting has very dramatic effects that are not just on those of you who might need to do registration election day. If 540,000 folks show up to register election day, they would not be allowed to vote. They would have to fill out a provisional ballot. And then your local election officials would have to process these as fast as they could. 500,000 ballots. How long would it take to know the outcome of an election as we try to process 500,000 ballots starting after the election? Most people want to know the results of an election at noon on election day. And I know you. And you might wait till 8 o'clock unless you're, be embarrassed. But at 8:01, you want to know. The next morning, you got pistols out if we haven't said. And that last couple recounts, the flack I got. What's wrong with you people? So one aspect of this debate is that the most important change has not been very well reported or hardly covered, but it would have a dramatic change on who got to vote, the administration of elections, the cost of it, because it's millions and millions, and nationwide, 1/3 of provisional ballots are never counted. In Minnesota, we are above average, so maybe we can shrink that to 1/5 or 1/10 or whatever. But for everybody whose vote is denied, they have the option to write to the Supreme Court, to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, under errors and omission, to ask them to take up their case. If there's 500 and some thousand people and 1/3 get disallowed, and those people write to the Supreme Court, we're talking about a chaos amendment, is what we're talking about. But when you go down to the bottom of the amendment, and it says in the bill, what shall be told to the Minnesota voters about this, to be asked, there's no mention of provisional balloting, no mention of getting rid of election day registration, no mention of the $40 million, none. And so I'm betting that somebody sues me, because I'm responsible, to say in the Minnesota Supreme Court, hey, if you want to get rid of same-day registration, don't go hiding it. If you want to create a new system called provisional ballots, say it. And so I think there's going to be quite a bit of controversy and discussion. And at the end of the day, the only recent election on the question of getting rid of same-day registration happened in Maine. And the citizens said by 61 to 38, we're keeping same-day registration. So we'll just have to see, what happens over this year.